so that you can wrap up, and there will be a little bit of time for questions. If you do use the whole 10 minutes, then I may not allow any questions depending on how we're running for time. Okay, so our first submitter is Mr. Murray Patchell, please. Thank you. From the Secretary of Ngāti Whakaui Education Endowment Trust Board. Thank you, Murray. And you'll find a purple button on the microphone. It will cut out if you stop speaking, so you will need to press it each time you talk again. Thank you.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. First time I've had the pleasure of addressing the council in this sort of capacity, but our interest was certainly piqued by the review process for gambling, and I do wear a number of hats, but today I'm representing the Ngāti Whakaui Education Endowment, which is a substantial landlord, if you like, in town. You're probably all reasonably familiar with the endowment leasehold lands, and we have obviously an interest from a landlord's perspective in the facilities being made available, or the options being made available. So I've made a written submission there, which I doubt the committee has had a look through, and presume you just want me to highlight the main points, or yeah, I don't know if there's questions or how you want to handle that, but yeah. So essentially, you know, what we're saying, and I guess I also add my personal interest in this area, that we don't think there should be a reduction in the gaming facilities. In fact, you know, we would go to the extent of endorsing a strategy that involves an increase in the opportunities, if it were available through a casino facility. Been involved in that for many years. Well, in the 1990s, I disclosed my interest as a director of Rotorua Casino Limited. It was an advocate for establishment of a casino in Rotorua, which was the moratorium came in and vetoed Rotorua and Wellington casinos at that time, which I think was a tragedy for our community. And we've since, of course, seen the proliferation of the pokie bars around town, which council has been trying to address. But we would advocate that it's an important part of our community is the process of you know, providing the facilities where people want to, you know, to spend their money in that area, and on the other side of the ledger is the opportunity for support, financial support to the community. And I have to say that the demand is somewhat insatiable. There simply is never enough money for the services that are being provided by our community groups, certainly here in Rotorua. And I see I do also wear a cap as a director of First Sovereign Trust Limited, so I'm in that sector. I see the numbers, and I see what we can't provide enough money to the Rotorua community groups from the Rotorua pool. We have to supplement that from other districts, which happens quite frequently. Yeah, we're a strong advocate of that. We question, you know, the research that APR have done. You know, we just don't know how much work they've done on the tourists. You know, every tourist destination that I've been to, which has casino facilities, are there strongly supported by the tourism sector. And I think that's something that, you know, we should be doing here in Rotorua. We've all heard the stories of the bus loads going to Hamilton, etc., and to satisfy their demand. We should be doing that here. We should be supporting the infrastructure and the employment and the opportunities that would come from those facilities. You know, the reports talk about lotto being a preference, and I just think it's really sad that money disappears away from our community. Every time I go and get petrol, I can buy a lotto ticket, and I don't really see. I don't know how much research has been done on the amount of lotto money that comes back to our district. But anecdotally, there's a lot of money. I've been in the queues at the lotto stalls and seen the sort of money that people are investing in that sector, and it's pretty huge. So we argue that there should be a competitive approach, and the pokies provide that. So haven't heard the minute bell yet, so I'm obviously still doing okay. So getting back, I guess, to the landlord's perspective, I think we need to allow some flexibility for venues to re-establish, because change does occur. We know a lot of our buildings in town are, don't meet the earthquake standards. They're old. They need redevelopment. The endowment, we've been trying to encourage lessees for many years to upgrade to limited response. But we think that there are situations where it's really not going to do our community the best advantage by closing down the facilities. If there's a change in landlord or a building is unsuitable, or there's an opportunity to upgrade the premises, add better facilities, that we should have that flexibility to do that and allow venues to relocate when circumstances are appropriate. I think made the point in the submission that government is supportive of the sector. I referred to the publication. Government may or may not have read that in detail, but they're quite strong endorsement of the sector there from the Minister of Internal Affairs and the Director of Gambling Compliance, that acknowledge the harm that occurs to some people, but a very small proportion of our community. We accept that, and I know it's it can be hard. I've personally been through a situation where my mother was an alcoholic and a gambler. She didn't have the opportunity of pokie, so she used the horses and did it that way. But that's what happens to some people, and I don't think that's altered my views in terms of support for the sector, because I see the value that the majority can handle it quite responsibly. And the government makes the point about the building the communities, the transfer of money, if you like, from one area, ideally from the visitors to town, tourists and international and domestics. That's where we should be clipping the ticket as much as possible, and then redistribute that to our clubs and our community groups and all those hard-working facilities in our community that are crying out for money, and there just simply isn't enough available. We've got some quite big funders in our community. The endowment, for example, distributes $1.7 million a year to our community for educational purposes. The Rotorua Energy Trust, the Bay Trust, some big supporters in there. I'm also a trustee on the Geyser Community Foundation, and we are building the capacity for distribution of funds to the community, again for the purpose of trying to get money to stay in our community and not disappear off to national organisations and other areas. So so I have a real interest in this, in support of the board, and I see that there is a way that we can make this work for the community. The industry is strongly regulated, very heavily regulated. In fact, the DIA, Internal Affairs, probably went overboard a couple of years ago, and they realised that they'd actually gone too far in terms of the way they've been trying to clamp down on the industry, and have actually backed off. So, these are examples of the support that they believe the communities can work together with the sector and make this work for the benefit commercially, for vibrancy of the commercial buildings, etc. in our town, and for the community support groups. Go on.
Thank you, Murray. Good, there is a little bit of time for questioning. Thank you, Ms. Steve.
Thank you, Murray, and also for the Ngāti Whakaue contribution to the community. You make a point here about the relocation of gaming machines, and what we've heard just so far seems to be a concern around that aspect of this policy, but also about the location of where they are in low decile areas. Is there a sort of midway point that you can see as a way through this?
Yeah, well, I think I'd accept that there's probably no need for these facilities to be out, too far away from the CBD. I think that's would be the strength of the sector if it was concentrated around the CBD, where they're bringing back the people into that sector and serving it. I mean, for tourists and so forth, that's where they go. They're not going out to, I won't mention the suburbs, but the low decile areas. And I accept that. There's a case, but I don't think just closing them off and sinking lid policy carte blanche is actually going to do the best thing for the community.
Yeah. Thanks, Murray.
Thank you. There are no further questions, so I'll thank you very much for your submission today, Murray. Excellent. Our next submitter is Mr. Malcolm Short, the Chairman of Pukeroa Aurua Whata Trust and First Sovereign Trust. Welcome, Malcolm. Kia ora.
Kia ora and thank you. As you heard, I'm here speaking on behalf of the Pukeroa Aurua Whata Trust, and likewise from the other side of the fence, the First Sovereign Gaming Trust. I am not in favour of the sinking lid policy, nor the non-relocation clauses that are being bandied about, and on behalf of these two enterprises have strongly objected to that stance. The main reason being that, as you may have heard, that relocation is sometimes brought upon tenancies, not through their own fault, through fire, with some catastrophe. Likewise, overzealous landlords who have hiked the price on them because they think they're creaming it, so to speak. And for those very good reasons, those people should be allowed to continue in business. That sinking lid policy just eliminates them if there was no relocation clause. Probably further to that would be the actual funds that are provided to the community when Rotorua enjoys something like, or in the millions, I could say. I'll give you some of those numbers further down in my presentation. Problem gambling, we understand, is a big issue, but harm minimisation is a huge burden on trusts and venue operators. The DIA have clamped right down on that, and they have so-called inspectors around every corner or around every doorpost, so to speak. They're certainly out and about. And for that reason, the harm minimisation we see is well under control, and we contribute hugely to that policing of that issue through funding to DIA and problem gambling and all of those others who put their hands out. So just going down through my list, I've had, as you've probably all read there, that those are some very good reasons why we see the non-relocation clause as a certain hindrance. And as I said, in those reasons, you'll see my reasons here under point 7, 8. It certainly strengthens the case that they need support in that area. In addition to those, I've noted over page there that the economic benefits of a Rotorua casino in conjunction with Class 4 community grants should be the Rotorua model. That has been proven in other cities, that there's no detriment to the local gaming industries because of the presence of a casino. Class examples are Auckland and Christchurch. And commenting on the APR research, we found it was not balanced with the views of the community grant recipients. Those are the people who have commented and are quite adamant that APR have not got the full picture. Thirdly, the Rotorua Lakes Council has been a beneficiary of grants from a local gaming society trust, namely First Sovereign, of which I chair, and that has been for many community facilities and activities, all good causes, and that has been in vogue since 2005, the total to date being a figure of $2,933,741.07. The total for all Rotorua grants over the same period being $27,400,000, I think it is there, without my glasses, but a princely figure. And finally, the government has also benefited from the Rotorua gaming pool due to the gaming duty payments and problem gambling levies to the tune of $18 million. And that is all through payments to the Department of Internal Affairs. So I'm happy to answer any questions if we have.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. Questions around the table? Are there any? Yes, thank you, Steve.
I have to ask you, Malcolm, thank you for that and the contribution to the community. Where are you at with this casino idea?
We've planted the seed in Minister Joyce's ear at a recent chamber meeting. He said he was very receptive. He said it's a bit out of left field, but tell me more. So we're preparing a case to tell him more at this stage.
Do you think that was the problem, Malcolm, in your view? Because you go way back to when Internal Affairs first started opening the field to gambling industry, that there wasn't regulation at the time.
Absolutely.
Are there any further questions? No. Okay, thank you very much, Malcolm. And thank you for all the support that First Sovereign gives to the community. Thank you. And our next submitter today is Tanya Smith. Thank you, Tanya. You have 10 minutes, Tanya, and I'll wave my hand when you're getting near so that there's a little bit of time left in case there are any questions. Please do use your microphone because it is being recorded and it just makes it easier for those listening. Thank you.
Okay, probably best to start with some figures. Malcolm may have already gone over those. 5,852,847, 65,000, $2,745. The figure first was the figure made in the last quarter from this area alone by pokie machines. The 65,000 is per day, what the pokie machines make. 2,700 per hour, $45 per minute is what is taken out of the community. Out of that, $1 per $2.50 is returned to the community. Kia ora, my name is Tanya Smith, former Sky City croupier and daughter of a problem gambler. As we grew up, Mum always fluttered, as we do, on the pokie machines. We thought nothing of it at the time. We all do it. Wasn't until I was a teen things started changing, things got a little bit difficult. That's life. She fluttered a little bit more. Dad got work again. It seemed to slip away. Nothing to worry about. Then the proverbial hit the fan, as it does in life. But this was 10 years later. Amongst the divorce, a new mokopuna, my mother deciding that her difficulties were better by gassing herself, we discovered the mess she had hidden. Between the 3 kids, we parted with money to fix it, and not small amounts of money. I'm talking substantial amounts of money. No matter who we went to, everybody kind of went, oh yeah, well that's your thing. You deal with it. Hundreds of thousands of dollars later, between my brother, my sister and I, we have managed to get my mother to a certain level. When it comes to problem gambling, pokies are your most accessible machine. One-armed bandits. When it comes to regulation, and I think your sinking lid regulation is definitely a step in the right direction. One of the things that's really different about having a casino that Malcolm's proposing versus having pokies in small establishment is to do with the regulations, is to do with the management of people being able to monitor those. Now what I mean by that is when you've got a bigger organisation like Sky City, the management of somebody who is a problem gambler, and as a family member you can go in and actually have them registered. Now as a croupier, there are 10 cameras at any one time on you. That's just the dealer. That is just the dealer. That's every table they have in there. There's at least 10 cameras on what you are doing. They have face recognition. They can tell who the problem gamblers are. They keep files. And what happens is that they come in, the security comes in, they gently push that person out, they circle them around, the security will circle them, and they push them to a door that takes them out the back. They then discuss with them that they're not meant to be there, and they send them on their way. It's a situation that people go, oh, well, they don't do anything, these organisations. But they do. They at least try. But when you have pokies and you have a bar that's sitting there, you don't always get that. The bar becomes really busy. They can't monitor who's going in and out and around the back. And quickly it becomes the place where people can go. Now, the sinking lid policy for me is a good idea. It's definitely something I think we need. But I also feel that if gambling's not going to go away, so it's definitely something that is here in our community. And when it's not regulated or managed or monitored in a way that truly looks after those that are vulnerable, it's a lot harder to manage the consequences of that. So the consequences being no food in cupboards for some kids. And that's the reality. Homelessness for some. Families like mine torn apart. Those are the consequences. So definitely when it comes to the sinking lid, it's something that I really do support. But I also support the idea that perhaps we need them together in one space where they can be managed and the individuals in there can be monitored. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya, for your very poignant portrayal of an experience that your family has gone through. Certainly does give us background to that area of problem gambling. And it is heartening to hear that you recognise that they are here to stay, and our job is to see if we can find a way to help best manage that in our community, and your submission will help towards that. So, questions? Do I have any questions around the table? No, I don't. Yes, thank you, Mayor Chadwick.
Comment that you made, and thank you, Tanya, for your figures too. The money returned to the community, the rest is spent on gambling addiction treatment, isn't it?
Sorry, $2 out of $2.50, $1 is returned to the
Yep.
community via grants and so forth.
Yep.
I'm not quite sure out of that what figure is actually made up that goes to the problem gambling. So, I mean, quite a substantial amount of the money shifts away from the community, and whether or not we like it, a lot of that money could have been spent in the community in terms of food, clothing, warmth, all those sorts of things that are taken away from the community. I'm not quite sure how much problem gambling it would cover.
Thank you again, Linda, for putting a very real face to statistics for us about those issues. Thank you. Now, our next submitter is going to be Linda Hunt, and that's on page 15. Thank you, Linda. So if you could turn the microphone on, Linda, with the purple button, yes, and I'll wave my hand if you get near the sort of 8.5 minute mark, just so you can leave.
That won't be a problem.
Just so you can leave time for questioning. So you
Yeah, no,
have
sure.
10 minutes. Thank you.
Sure. Just find my pieces of paper. So my name's Linda Hunt, and I'm the Operations Manager at Riding for the Disabled. And we're a community-based organisation at Parawai Road in Nongataha. And we've been the recipient of grants. We've been the recipients of large amounts of grants. Our indoor facility was funded through grant money from New Zealand Community Trust. So over the last 10 years, by way of grants, we've had money from First Sovereign Trust, Four Winds, Infinity, Lion Foundation, Southern Trust, New Zealand Community Trust, Pub Charity, Green Thistle, Oxford Sport Trust and Trillion Trust. So over the last 10 years for our organisation, that's come to $203,000. That's been returned to us directly to help with funding our riding programs for the children in the community. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about what we do, because I've just been to a conference and we've talked a lot about the rights of children and people with disabilities. And one of the main aims for every boy and girl born equal has equal rights, and we must take all measures to ensure full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms, including access to health, educational and recreational services by children with disabilities and children with special needs. And that's to help promote self-reliance and to facilitate their participation in our community. So that's a really big core part of what we're doing in the community. We're providing approximately 80 people every week with the opportunity to participate in equine-based therapy. It's not, as it is perceived by some people, as just being you plonk a child on a pony and go for a nice little tutu around in our lovely indoor arena at Parawai Road. It's not like that at all. We have physiotherapist input. Our coaches, we all train them and they go away for training. And our horses are all selected to be suitable to deliver the appropriate sort of therapy to the child, and that they're very quiet as well, because sometimes the children can make strange noises, which horses aren't that keen about. So our operation is basically reliant on sponsorship. And the two main contributors to our big build at Nongataha were the New Zealand Community Trust. That was $500,000. Their money is directly coming from gambling. The other one was Rotorua Energy Charitable Trust, and obviously that's a completely different setup. But we have a lot of children every week. We have close association with many of the special needs schools and also the mainstream schools in Rotorua. We have all the clients from the Keir Street Specialist School. They all come and participate in a riding program on a revolving basis. So I think the role there is probably between 80 and 90. And they all come and have a riding program with us. But unfortunately, we have to charge. Our service is not provided free to the children. And we also have a very strong relationship with the Stand, that's Health Camp. Stand's a new name for Princess of Wales Health Camp. Very strong relationship there. The children who come to Stand come for different social and emotional reasons, and they all come for a riding program, and they ride every week the whole time that they're on that intake. And we see really good gains with those children. They become much more positive. They start to build self-esteem. They start to show something that's really important for our children. They start to show empathy. They show empathy for an animal, and that's really, really important for a child who may have generally they have a lot of underlying social issues. I'm not going to say that's attributed to gambling. It's attributed to a lot of factors in our community, and gambling is only one of them. And I personally feel that these people who want to gamble, it's of their own free will. I do know people who do have an addiction to gambling, and obviously that's not something that I'm trained or skilled at or know anything about, but I know that from people gambling and spending their money generally in a recreational way, that our community organisation is benefiting from it. So out of our overall operating costs, the clients only contribute 10% of what we need to run, and so for us it's a real struggle to create income. There's no government funding for what is becoming more and more recognised as a very, very beneficial form of therapy for children and young people. We're getting more and more demand on our time for children with issues with mental health. I'm seeing more and more children suffering from depression at a much younger age, depression and anxiety, and the horse riding is very, very beneficial for those children. We also have children who come to us who are wheelchair bound. It's the only time they get out of their wheelchair is when they get on the horse. So for them, it's very beneficial socially, emotionally, and physically, because it helps to build up core strength. And if you can imagine, if you just sat in that chair where you are now for 24 hours, it's not going to be very good for your health or your systems. But if we're going to pop you on a horse, and you're going to be subject to the movement, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's equivalent to you being stimulated like you were walking. And that's really, really positive for our clients, and we see really, really huge benefit. All our clients love it, their caregivers love it, the teachers love it, and they see real positive benefits from it with the children and the young people who come as well. Yeah, so we'd like the money to keep on rolling in the door, please.
Thank you, Linda.
No
Councillor Donaldson has a question for you.
Sure.
Thank you, Linda.
Yep.
So 10% of your revenue or your budget comes from charges.
Yes.
Correct. Of the remainder,
Yes.
how much of that is charitable, and what are your opportunities to get funding from other other areas other
apart
than
from ones who are gaming.
other than the gaming trust?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. I have my answer on a piece of paper that's somewhere in here. This is the list of trusts. The orange ones are the gambling ones. So there are opportunities, obviously, to get money from other trusts. The ones whose money comes from gambling make up, I'd say, a third of the trusts that we apply to. There's lotteries, Geyser Community Fund, Rotorua Trust, obviously Bay Trust, Perpetual Trust. There are Rotorua District Council's been really helpful as well. We get money from Lions, Margaret Huia, Clark Trust. But the gaming dollar has shrunk. The amount of money that people have to share around, if we, for instance, if we apply for a grant maybe for like 20,000, we probably consider ourselves really lucky if we get 11. And yeah, so it's that is quite reduced. But we seek money, you know, from all different sources. Yeah.
Thank you, Linda. Councillor Kent.
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Thank you, Linda, for your submission, and I have to congratulate you on the very good work that you and your people actually do. My question is, how long has Riding for the Disabled in Rotorua actually been operating?
Oh, really good question. Okay, so it was started in 1979, and it's been operating ever since, and it's built up over the years. We were for a long time out at Hannah's Bay on Lee Road, on transit land, under threat of having a motorway built through us. But in the meantime, we weren't able to ever build an indoor facility there because the airport had a big extension, and all of a sudden the flight trajectory covered our land, and we weren't allowed to go over about, I can't remember what it was, 4 or 5 metres or something like that. So there's no way we could ever build an indoor school at Hannah's Bay. And we found land through people who work really hard, and we have land on the edge of Lake Rotorua on Parawai Road. It belongs to Waikuta No. 2 Trust, and we're really lucky to have a relationship with them, and we've built our indoor school there. So it's riding and horses has just become more and more accepted as a really positive form of therapy for all types of disability. We are affiliated to the New Zealand Riding for Disabled. We have to have an operational certificate. So someone comes around and checks that our doors latch, that we have a disabled toilet, that our ramps are all, you know, everything's up to speed. And so, you know, we're not just like random, if you know what I mean. We're not just shed in the paddock. We try to have kudos. We've also funded a student to do her PhD on why this works. And she's just in the process of doing her thesis and presenting it to us in a form that we're all going to be able to read and that I'm going to be able to give to our funders on why it works. And this woman knew nothing about horses.
Thank you, Linda. I'm actually sorry.
That's right.
I'm going to stop you there. It's
That's okay.
We'll be really interested in hearing
Yeah,
the thesis.
thesis.
And I'm very familiar with the work that you do.
Thanks.
I was a volunteer at the Hannah's Bay very long time ago
Oh, cool.
when my children were at school. So thank you very much for your submission and for the background information on the various funders, both from gambling and from other sources. So thank you. Now our next submitter, we're actually going to jump ahead to you, Reg, because we've had a few no-shows or late arrivals. So if you're happy to come down, that would be great. So that's on page 21. Reg Hennessy from Hennessy's Irish Bar. And if you could use the microphone, thank you, because it's being recorded. Lovely. And you have 10 minutes. Just the purple one. Purple, grey.
G'day guys, thanks for allowing me to come and speak today. And I'd like to speak on the part of a publican, the person that's at the coal front that hosts the gaming machines. I think a lot of times the people that actually the host of the gaming machines get a little bit looked over when we have all these, every time something comes up for a possible change in gaming. I've been a publican for 30 years. The first pubs I run were in Australia, in a very rough part of Australia at the time, Port Melbourne, so I saw all sorts of problems, including gambling over the bar, guys losing thousands and thousands of dollars playing coins at night, playing darts, losing thousands of dollars. Of course, all legal gambling. At the time I was in my mid-20s, and that's what we did. We allowed it to happen. Come back to New Zealand, first got into gaming, first had hosted gaming machines in 1992, and at one stage had up to 78 gaming machines in different bars that I operated. Sadly, some of the things that went on back in those days I'm not proud of, and not that I think I did anything illegal, and I don't think a lot of the other guys that operated gaming machines in their bars did. But it was a bit more like the Wild West back through the 90s. Of course, a continuation of legislation has tidied it up and got rid of a lot of people that were most probably better without in the industry. Through my time as I was Vice President of New Zealand Hospitality for I was on the New Zealand Hospitality Board for 6 years, Vice President for 4 years, and during that time as Vice President headed a forum that did a lot of work with the Department of Internal Affairs and the government on getting 2 points put into the last gaming bill that came out. And one of those 2 points was relocation of gaming machines, and that's the thing I'd like to talk about today, the actual relocation. And I think where a lot of people miss the boat here when we, just at this point I must say that I do agree with your working committee that there is a problem in the suburbs with bars that host gaming machines, and I think that the overview of where they're hosted and how they're hosted definitely needs to always be monitored very closely. But with the possibility of using being unable to use relocation of gaming licenses to sink the lid, I think it's very short-sighted, because all of this is going to happen over the coming years. The bars that are in the suburbs that host gaming licenses now, in some cases I think really aren't to the standard they should be, they will hang on to those licenses forever and a day if they can't be relocated. And you take somewhere like Hennessy's, it's just been rebuilt. In excess of $2.5 million was spent on the rebuild between the landlord and the tenants. Now has 9 gaming machines. The 9 gaming machines return a portion of the turnover of Hennessy's of less than 5%. And I think this is another point that's not been clearly picked up by the working committee, that they need to have a good look at what the bars and the different areas are actually, what the gaming return for them, part of the turnover of their whole business is. And I think that would tell you a huge story about the business. And I think that's one thing that you people should look at a lot closer. And I think you would find a lot more out about the type of businesses that have been run in different areas. Going on to Hennessy's, it's a big bar. Just tomorrow there's a marquee going up that's costing $10,000 to host the Lions supporters. It's about food, which is now nearly 50% of its turnover. When Hennessy's was first built, food was about 20%. It's about, of course, alcohol and drinks. It's about entertainment. It's about live music. It's about sport. It's about tourism. It's about safety. It's about well-run bar with well-trained staff, good appearance, clean, very clean all the time. All these things fall into the category of a place like Hennessy's. Another bar that I can throw into the same category was only 100 metres down the road is the Pig and Whistle. He has always chose not to host gaming machines, which I totally respect. But at any time we could have another Hennessy / Pig and Whistle that will come into Rotorua because of the tourism demand that's coming, and want to build another big vibrant pub into the middle of town, and if the council or you people don't think it's going to happen, you're in dreamland. And what your effect is saying that that place could possibly not go out to one of those poor suburban areas and buy that gaming machine licence, move that into his town, supply more entertainment for his customers and guests, get that bar closed down. That would also help those people with a ticket to get out of that bar that most probably want to sell it, and it would be just a win-win for everybody. Just on what Tanya was saying earlier about the way a casino runs its operation compared to the way a bar runs it, well, I haven't read in recent times where there's been too many children locked in car parks and bars like you often read at the Auckland Casino. In the last 12 months there's been 2 bad incidents. And I think that most of us keep the bad element out of our bars these days, unlike the casinos who've got millions and millions of Chinese going through laundering a lot of money, which has been getting spoken about all the time. Hennessy's, all the staff in Hennessy's are well trained, whether it be in alcohol harm minimisation, the alcohol legislation, gambling harm minimisation. To walk into Hennessy's gaming room, you have to walk directly by the bar. At the back of the bar, you can turn around and look straight through a hole right into the gaming room where the people can come up to. You can see the whole room at any given time. There would be no room in Rotorua, if anywhere in New Zealand, that can be better monitored. As I say, always another thing to always look at when you're looking at these things is how bars are run and how the organisation runs it, is always have a good look at the cleanliness. Go into the toilets, go into the gaming rooms, look behind the doors. That always tells the story too. Hennessy's is gaming room. 90% of Hennessy's gaming money would just about be tourists or new immigrants that are working in town, i.e. A lot of the Asian workers and that like to come in there because they feel safe, secure, and they like the environment. I would suggest to everybody that's involved in making the decisions on this, and I'd ask the question, how many of you have walked into how many gaming rooms in Rotorua and had a good look at them, to get an understanding yourselves before you go out and make this decision. One on, a personal understanding. Go and look at a place like Hennessy's, go and look at one in the suburbs, go and look at another bar in Rotorua. Before you rush in and make these decisions, think long term. When new bars come into our town, nice, new, vibrant businesses that want to open up, that are supported and backed by the breweries, gaming is part of the business that is needed for the vibrancy and also to help the business be what it is these days. Have a long, hard think before you put on something that stops the transfer of licences, because once you make that decision, you're stuck with it forever, and forever you'll have these little gaming bars in your suburbs where some people have only got to walk 20 metres from their lounge to the front door of a bar, and there are definitely bars like that in the suburbs of Rotorua. When the bars are in town, we get a lot more visits from the police. We get a lot more visits from I think, the local liquor people, so we are monitored a lot closely. All as I really just ask is to think long and hard before you stop the allowance of transfer of licences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reg. I'll open that up for questions. Mayor Steve, thank you.
Thank you, Reg, and thanks for also giving us sort of very targeted submission on where we could look. You did once support the Hospitality Association. Would you say there'd be support? This is from you at the bar. Would the Hospitality Association members in Rotorua have a supportive view of your submission?
Well, sadly, less and less bars in Rotorua because I think of the model of bars that we're getting in Rotorua, and dare I say it, I hide no secrets, some of the operators of some of the models, no, they don't belong to our association, so they can't support it, no.
Okay, so it's your view, thank you.
That's my view. My view on the suburban bar, yes, but the relocation is the Hospitality New Zealand's also strong view that it should happen.
And good luck with the marquee on Saturday.
Yeah, well, it's going to be full.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No, thank you very much, Reg, for making a submission. It is very valuable when we have someone who does work in that industry, and with your 30 years experience, it does
No worries.
certainly help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next submitter. Okay, we've got a bit of a gap, so we'll just have a little informal tea break or stretch your legs until our next submitter turns up. They are on their way, and that is Pariha Huata, that's page 21. So we've had some who have pulled out. John Fennick has pulled out, and Tapai Fitzel has not arrived, nor has Marcella Edmonds. Unfortunately, Rihanna Engelin is unable to get here before 2:30, which is when they're scheduled to speak. So we will still have a 2:30 submitter. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. We're going to start with our final submission of the day, although we do have someone else who's due on their way. So, Raina, thank you very much. Now, you have 10 minutes. Your microphone is on. I'll just wave my hand to you if you get near the 10 minutes so that you leave a little bit of time for questions at the end.
Thank you.
And that's page number 24. Lovely. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you. My name is Raina. Yes, that's
Raina.
fine. Just before I start, just on behalf of the Rotorua Sports and Community Association, we just want to pass on our condolences and deepest respects to our Mayoress, Stevie Chadwick, on the recent loss of her husband. Our thoughts are with her and her whānau. Kia ora, thank you. So I understand you've all got a copy of the written submissions. So I just really want to add to that and read a statement. So I did a little bit of research and I went into the Department of Internal Affairs and I've got this little statement. I've made copies, only 5 of them, sorry, because I ran out of paper. But I actually copied the whole document. But I'll just read the statement from the Minister.
We'll come and collect some of those copies. Thank you, Raina. And I'm sure we can manage to share.
Thank you. And I believe this supports the written submission that I've made. So New Zealand has a strong and vibrant community culture built on people coming together to help others. Much of the support is provided by community groups across a variety of activities, including sport and recreation, the arts, health and education. Critical to the success of every one of these organisations is funding. Electronic gaming machines, also called pokie machines, poker machines, or one-arm bandits, provide a substantial amount of money which is returned to the community in the form of grant funds. Pokies are sometimes seen only in a negative light because of their association with gambling harm, but provided they are regulated and operated properly by responsible societies and venues, pokies provide a valuable source of funding for community groups. Around $260 million of gaming funds annually goes to a range of community causes, much of it to the region where it was collected. Many community groups that benefit would find it difficult to operate without grants from gaming machine societies. And I'd just like to add Rotorua Sports Club would be one of those affected groups. Some community groups, for various reasons, prefer not to source this money, but for many others, it's a lifeline. There's something more about the booklet, and I copied the whole booklet. Oh, sorry. And just in ending, I believe the sustainability of funding from the gambling sector in New Zealand plays a crucial role in building strong communities. As long as we continue efforts to reduce gambling harm through regulation and social initiatives, we can also celebrate this fact. Kia ora. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you. That was very quick and concise. Now, I will open that up for questions around the table. There are no questions from us. Thank you for coming so well prepared. Oh, Mr. Thomas, excellent. Thank you.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I'm a bit slow for that today. Thank you for your submission. Now, I like that last bit that you just read out about if we have proper regulation to reduce the harm,
Yes.
then it is still a good ongoing source for funding for groups such as your own. Now, I think what Council has been trying to do with this policy that they've put out, proposed policy at the moment, is by using a sinking lid policy, is not to get rid of all pokie machines, but to actually try and address that issue of harm within our community.
Right.
So I don't think there's an attempt to stop completely that funding coming from
No.
that sector. So if there was still funding coming from it, would you be more comfortable with that sinking lid policy and the no relocation policy?
So we're talking about reduction of the pokie machines, which inevitably leads to a reduction in the amount of funding available. And we're up against a number of other organisations who compete for that money, and it's not granted at any time at all. And we certainly don't want to be in a position where, unfortunately, we miss out because there's just not enough money to go around. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Thomas. Are there any other councillors that wish to ask any questions of our... Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Raina. Could you tell me your premises out there, are they owned by the association and are they on whose land? Do you pay a land rental? Or what are your costs, your operating costs?
Yes, I printed out our last audited report and I just forgot to bring that to me. But it's actually Māori-owned land and we pay an annual rental. It's a rebated sum of $13,000 at the moment. I think for the following year that'll go up to $16,000.
And another question, do you know where you stand as a facility in terms of the sewerage scheme that's being put into that community?
Yes, I understand that we were lucky to be included with the marae out there, so that any money that's going to be charged for that, we would be exempt from that.
Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for coming today and your submission. I thought just while you're here, perhaps it would be beneficial for us to get a perspective from your point of view from a rural area. I mean, I know that the Rotorua Sports and Community Association is pretty much the backbone of that community, and so it's so wonderful to have you here in person. But just wanting to know if the views that you've brought today are actually reciprocated with the other wider community within the Rotorua area.
Well, that was going to be a question of mine. How many other submissions have been made in relation to this? And will that answer
Ask
your question?
exactly how many we've had. Someone will know the number. 181 submissions received.
So we were alerted to this through the Bay of Plenty Rugby Union. And they encouraged all the sports clubs, rugby clubs in the Rotorua area, Central Bay region, to forward applications and make submissions.
About 20, I haven't counted it, probably a few more submitters today speak, yes. Are there any further questions from Raina? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just want to thank the council for allowing me this time to make my submissions. And can you tell I'm really nervous? I don't know why. I've been talking to the judge all morning. This is different, yeah.
You've done very well. I do know that it is quite a stressful thing to appear and make a submission before council. Not an easy thing. We certainly
I've never done it before.
appreciate you coming in and the reflection back from the community. It certainly helps us in our decision making.
Kia ora. Thank you very much.
Now we have one more submitter who has phoned and said they're on their way. So I propose that we just wait till possibly 25:02, because our last submitter was due at 2:30 and we're a little ahead of time, and then I think we'll wrap up after that. That is Pariiha Huata. Yes. While we're waiting, obviously we've heard all the submissions today, and we've kind of council's in this sort of untenable position of needing to support both sides of this polarity, our community groups that receive funding, and also the issues that have been raised with problem gambling and also areas of location. So I'd quite like to just have an open bit of a discussion here, and then see if maybe we can come back with a resolution to ask staff to see what other options they can come back, because there appears, certainly from the submitters, that there are a few gaps in the policy we've got ahead of us. So how, as a hearings panel, how are you happy to discuss that, and whether you have something you'd like to add there, Steve or Dave, about that at this point?
Look, I'm happy to, and I think it's because we're wrapping up virtually, and I've got a bit concerned about both views, really. The funding shortfall that is clearly evident that we can't address alone, and the impact then on our community. And I wonder if we're not really zooming around the right area with the sinking lid that I feel comfortable with, because we're trying to show incremental managing harm down over time. But the relocation is worrying me, especially even when I heard Reg there. I don't like the little bars in the neighbourhoods of lowest deprivation and the gaming machines there. And I wonder if we then, we might kill off the opportunity to have them into managed premises like the Hennessy's bar. So I feel that's the area where we can make the richest gain over time here. So I'd love staff to come back with something that reflects that. And I'm not even sure about the sense of tying up the TAB in this class
So it's
4
really
machines.
a couple of issues. It's the TAB issue, which is seen as a separate. It's the loss of revenue to the clubs, which our community groups, and it's the issues of the location. And and harm in the community. And Rob, you have something to add, and then I think Phil.
To me, we seem to have 2 or 3 issues here. One is the relocation thing, which I think we've definitely got a problem with. If a business has to relocate because it's no longer profitable to stay where they are, or their building's got to be torn down or something like that, they have to have the ability to relocate. So I think we've got to address that issue. The second issue is the one of proliferation of pokie machines in the lower standard of living neighbourhoods, and I think that is an area we have an opportunity to address. And the third one, I think, is if you look at page 60, which is the submission from the problem gambling folks, there is actually a very, very good graph there that actually shows you the rapid rise in pokie machine numbers and the dollar spend on them. And whilst there was almost an exponential growth from 1994 through to 2004 in terms of machine numbers, and the spend followed it, the fall off in machines since the change in regulations and the reduction in machines, the actual spend hasn't fallen off to the same extent, so that perhaps the potential impact of cutting back on numbers isn't going to be quite so dramatic as perhaps we fear with regards to available funding going to these organisations. So I think those to me are the 3 areas that perhaps need looking at further.
Thank you. Phil?
Look, I have thought about the same areas actually. The shrinking lid, I'm actually pretty comfortable with in lots of ways. I think if we look back to what's happened in the current policy, in actual fact, we've only lost half a dozen machines in more years than that. I mean, we haven't really lost any, and that's why we were looking at the no relocation to actually try and kick that along a bit. But I have felt quite nervous about the fact that we might end up with lots of pokie machines out in the suburbs, and all the harm associated with that. And I wonder if that relocation policy, we could do something like no relocation within the non-CBD area, no relocation within the CBD area, but relocation from the suburbs to the CBD. So pretty well what Reg was suggesting, actually, that if there is some place out, a bar out in the suburbs that's struggling and they've got a couple of pokie machines out there, those could be relocated into the city. Now, it would mean we wouldn't get that sinking lid so quickly, but once it was in the CBD, they wouldn't be able to relocate it somewhere else in the CBD. So we'd still have that, but it would give us an opportunity to pull the pokies back into what seems to be recognised as a less harmful area than having them out in the suburbs. So I wondered if that might be something we could look at.
I think the numbers, we've got 26 venues, 13 are in the CBD and 13 are out in the suburban area. And the reduction, in fact, it was Valentine's, which was due to a business closing and various other things that went on. So we did, those machines are out of circulation permanently now, but that was the only recent reduction in gaming machines. So, yes, anything on this, Shirley, and then you, Rob, again.
So with the relocation, and currently some of these bars have 18 machines, when you're looking at the relocation, can it be brought down to say, can we monitor the number that can be relocated and say, well, Reg has said that he's only got 9, and I think he actually has a license for a lot more than that 9. Is there any way, I know Nevin mentioned that we couldn't actually restrict the number, but in that relocation, is there a way that it can be restricted so that we're not decimating businesses, but we're not actually encouraging that, huge growth that we don't want to see? And that way we'd get that sinking lid opportunity because you're reducing the number available.
I think that again is striking the balance between it not being such a disincentive that if you move and you lose so many machines, then no one's going to move anyway. So it's finding what is the sweet point in that, Rob.
Yes, just the other issue that's occurred to me, obviously, is I think we should be drawing more of a distinction with the TAB board venues as opposed to just the ordinary old pokies in the type pubs. So I think maybe we need a separate policy for TAB board type venues, and certainly they should be able to relocate should it be necessary.
Those are issues we can certainly ask staff to come back with just a few more policy options for us to debate over. And because this has been audio, there'll be an audio file, so our other colleagues who are unable to be here today will have an opportunity to listen to these submitters and also listen to this brainstorming. Dave.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I support most of the comments that are made. Just in relation to the one that Phil mentioned about no relocations in the inner city, I think the scenario that Mr. Hennessy painted is a real possibility, and it may well be that there could be an enterprise that comes to the city that would want to purchase an existing licence in the inner city, but also one of those ones in a low socioeconomic area and create a larger, vibrant venue. And so I would suggest, that we maybe have some wording in that within the inner city that relocations would only be allowed in exceptional circumstances to an enhanced venue or something along those lines. Yeah. Right.
And it takes into where we want our entertainment precinct and our nighttime, because it becomes, again, if it is wrapped in a bar, it becomes a policing issue, and that relates also to hours. So all of those things. Yes, Raj.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think one of the issues that was touched by, what's her name, one of the submitters, and I think Ms. Klein, was about the kid wanting to sort of get some food and mother was sort of hanging around. It's probably an incident that was reported, but I think in the media in the past we've been reported about incidents in town as well where people have left their kids in the car to go in and thinking that they'll go in and gamble for a little time. So I don't think it's only isolated to the suburbs, but with the suburbs comes the school problem, where the kids are passing there all the time. So how do we curb them? Do we give them some hours of operation that they can operate, or I don't know. That's
Legislation,
It's-
so
it is.
that's a bigger issue.
it is.
Yeah.
It's probably better to just instruct staff to come back with a policy that reflects our intention rather than us try to develop the policy. I have an issue with the bars in the suburbs, just the little wee ones, you know, where and they're very near dairies, Raj, you know, that we're worried about that low level of crime too for dairy owners, you know, to get money to go in and use the pokies.
I think I might, before we stray in, because, you know, we've obviously got existing use rights and all of those
Yeah.
sorts of things, and these are businesses. So it's really a high-level steer
Intent.
to our staff to
Yep.
come back with some resolutions that picked up certainly the points you made, Councillor Kent. Have you got something further to add?
Just perhaps while they're looking at that, they should also look at the potential impact of if a casino was actually mooted for Rotorua, what the impact of any legislation that we're putting in place here would have on that future possibility.
And that's a central government decision. Yes, Tanya.
Yeah, and just following on what Councillor Kent said as well, I do think that is something we do need to remain open-minded about. I mean, that will come as a separate and probably big conversation in future, but we don't want to cut off the chances now without actually evaluating that proposition in the first place. And I've just got to say I totally agree with what Councillor Donaldson has proposed as well. At first I was very much of the mind on there should be absolutely no exceptions because we should have a hard stance on this, but after listening to the community I think it's quite clear there are some areas where being lenient on those exceptions for special circumstances that are controlled I think would be quite good. So yeah, I think we're kind of all on the same page right now.
It's fantastic. And fortunately, we have Grant Ewison here, who I'll actually ask to come up and sit in the submitter's seat, who's more of an expert in this, and he'll just give us his professional opinion on this. Thank you, Grant.
And I feel like I'm now right down the other end of the room, and probably that's not terribly appropriate either. Just in terms of, I suppose, taking this into deliberations, it's just a question. One of the difficulties with this policy in some respects is that you're quite constrained about what you can have in a policy in terms of what the legislation provides. So some of the suggestions around, for example, limiting hours or those sorts of things actually fall outside of the kind of framework that you have in terms of this legislation. And in terms of relocation and some of the complexities that you can get back into about what you'd like to restrict in terms of where a relocation could go can get very complicated as well. So, for example, you know, should they be within 100 metres of a primary school or a community facility or those sorts of things. So, just bringing it back to, I suppose, a point of if you do want to sort of deliberate some of these matters now or have a discussion around them, that's fine, but I think in some respects to get into some of the detail and provide your officers with some support in doing that, you might want to set aside some workshop time. So I think it's useful to raise discussion points as you have, but to be able to respond to those in a considered way, we'll probably need, you know, a framework around that and some decent time to think about what that means. But at a high level, I can probably say this, that in terms of a separate TAB policy and a separate Class 4 gambling venue policy, that is a relatively straightforward option. So you can separate your policy so that it deals with that in a separate way. I suppose one of the things about the TABs that we did hear from Mr. True is you've got one, and it's pretty unlikely that you'll get two, and very unlikely that you get any more than that. So the question of it being limited, perhaps, to one is something you can also decide on and say that you don't want to go further than that. And in terms of that being relocated, that's something that you can discuss. On the question of relocation as a whole, the policy discussion that we had at the workshop was around, well, if you provide for a range of criteria which might suit a relocation, in some respects you're setting a framework for that that may be quite difficult to deal with when someone comes and says, do I fit into your relocation, but also figuring out what that would be. So, for example, how much of a building does need to be damaged by an earthquake before it can't be used, for example, or how much pressure does a landlord have to put on someone before it gets to the point where they can come to you and say, the landlord's putting pressure on me. And so defining that in advance, does that make it quite difficult? Whereas if you left it open and said, look, we're happy for you to come with a business case about why you think you should be relocated, provides you with an opportunity of looking at all of that information and the case study or the business case that's presented to you rather than the other way around. So just a little bit of a risk around defining what relocation means in advance. The other thing, I suppose, in response around the loss of revenue is even with a sinking lid and a no relocation policy, all of the existing premises are grandfathered or grandparented. So they stay, they have existing use rights. The only time in which Rotorua recently has had a change, even with your cap, is where a premise has closed down or been in a position where it's closed down. So Valentine's is really the only recent example of that. And there were some really odd circumstances around that in terms of why they ended up being closed down and why the machines were taken away. So in fact, in terms of revenue and the number of machines and venues, I don't see even a sinking lid and no relocation policy is going to have much effect on that in the short term or medium term. It may over a longer period of time, but it's not something that is going to have a dramatic situation where there is this amount of funding and then tomorrow none of that funding exists. So despite all the concerns brought to you about that, you're not going to see a significant drop-off in revenue from the point that you adopt a policy. But look, perhaps rather than me speaking, I'll just take some more notes of some of those issues. But I think to give you some proper advice on that, you probably do need to schedule a workshop or something like that so that we can take you through what the options are and then develop a policy. And unfortunately, these policies get a little bit complicated to write in response to that.
Thank you. Actually, I'm not going to open it for any questions. I think that's a really good note for us to end on because essentially it is at high level and we are at risk of delving into the details without that staff information and that workup. If we do plan a workshop, and that may well be the best opportunity for us to chew this over, then all of the councillors will be involved in that and we'll actually have some policy to discuss and work out where we want to sit with that. But your fleshing out of the issues, having sat and listened to us, has been really valuable, Grant, so I'd like to thank you for that. It's really good having that professional advice here in order to move through this policy, because there are a few fishhooks there and some unintended consequences, and I think it's important that we're all really aware of that. So on that note, our final submitter hasn't turned up. I'd just like to thank you all for your attendance and participation today in our hearings. Yes, one final thing, Councillor Tapsell.
Oh, sorry, just wanting to know perhaps what the process going forward from here is and what the timeline is. Decision making.
Yes. Okay, so we'll put a resolution for council to consider further options addressing. Do you want to speak, Councillor Donaldson?
Just a point of order. Could you tag that on to recommendation 1 that they be received and because you haven't put that yet? My understanding that it moved in second, but you haven't put it. So if you added it to the recommendation.
Excellent idea. Okay, so let's go back to recommendation 1, and I apologise for not having moved in. We had it, that we received it. Okay, so we add that we would like council to consider further options, loss of revenue, addressing the issues of location, and both the sinking lid and the possibility of a separation of a TAB policy. Has that captured?
Could you put the perceived loss of revenue?
Perceived.
I'm not actually convinced that there is going to be substantial, but a little bit more work marked.
It's the loss of revenue attached to the sinking lid policy.
Perhaps, Madam Chair, if I could be so brave as to give you some advice on
Yes.
on this. It's probably appropriate that the next step is deliberations, and I would suggest that you keep that actually at a very high level. So rather than perhaps delve into what other things you're going to deliberate, I'd perhaps have a resolution that just simply said, and that the committee deliberate on the written and verbal submissions, and with a view to adopting a policy or something like that, if you need to go that further. But I think just simply saying that the next step is to deliberate, because there's a huge amount of material, both written and oral, that you've heard today, a lot of different issues that you're starting to identify, but I think it would be best to have that in a frame where at the public of hearing through this resolution that your next step is to actually consider all this material in a deliberations process, rather than get into the detail.
I think that's probably very sound advice, because certainly around the table we're all on board with the issues that we do want more information on, and that will certainly feed into our deliberations. So thank you for that advice. Thank you. Okay, so that was part of recommendation 1, that the committee deliberate on the written and verbal submissions with a view to adopting a Class 4 gambling and board venue policy. I'll have a mover and a seconder, please. Mr. Thomas and Mrs. Trumper, thank you. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Thank you. And that ends our... And we'll put the first motion... I think we wrapped the two up together, but the first motion that we receive the Class 4 gambling and board venue policy. All those in favour? Aye. Thank you. Carried. Okay, thanks everyone.